to Starcraft Support the Maker. This week we are with the lovely Phil Saul. Phil, what's the name of your blog?
The Twisted Yarn.
And you've been one of our blog stars since the beginning, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. Quite a few years now.
Yeah, it is. And you're one of a select bunch of knitting bloggers.
Yes. Yeah, we're a bit outnumbered at the moment. I don't know why.
Yes, but I know from your work you are a huge fan of Fair Isle, aren't you?
Yes, stranded knitting in general. More non-traditional stranded than Fair Isle, really.
Oh, you've done some amazing pictures, and there was what was it called, Under the Water or something, that
yeah.
painting.
Yeah.
So how did you become a designer?
I think from knitting other people's patterns and just thinking, what if? I can't stop imagining, well, what if you added a motif to that sleeve, say, or change the bottom of this skirt or whatever a little bit. And it was a product of that, and making the what if become reality. And I've always got ideas bouncing around in my mind, and so it was just inevitable, really, that I'd start designing my own thing.
So how long ago did you start designing?
Hard to say, because it was a gradual process. I probably modified other people's designs first of all. I don't know, and then probably about 5 years ago, I really started designing from scratch, I think.
Oh, fantastic. Can you remember what was the first design you created?
It's only very basic, but I think there was a scarf, and I played with changing, I think it was Aran weight yarn, and I played with changing from the finest needles that I could physically knit it on to then some enormous chunky needles, and so it kind of got this undulating effect. And so, a very basic concept, but quite fun to do and quite striking results. I still wear that scarf.
Yeah? Oh, fantastic. And where do you get your inspiration from?
The natural world as much as anything, and both in terms of colours and also patterns and motifs, because I love complicated patterns, which is why I do stranded work. And there's just so much out there, whether in the texture of a rock or the curl of a fern or other leaves or whatever. There's just so much, I'm endlessly fascinated by the patterns in the natural world. And I just think Mother Nature is the best designer out there. The rest of us may as well just give up and go home, quite frankly. We're never going to be better than her, so I may as well steal her ideas because they're not copyrighted.
You did a fantastic hat that was both a knit and a crochet pattern, which was a silhouette.
Yes, the cowl with the reindeer.
Cowl, that was it.
Yes, and trees against the sunset. Yes, that came about because the route I used to drive home from work, I quite often caught the sunset over this forest, and it was all rather beautiful and atmospheric, but I was driving along the motorway, so I couldn't take a photo, obviously. So when Starcraft brought out a sock yarn that made me think of sunsets, that was it, and I just paired that with some black yarn and created this, and it worked pretty well. There's a reindeer walking up a hill, and then with some trees in the background and a couple of birds flying around, all in silhouette.
Yeah, it's lovely. Is that pattern still available?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Where's it?
The hiking reindeer, and the crochet version is the hiking moose, and you can find them via my website or my Ravelry page.
Super. So what's your process when you start designing? So say you see this amazing sunset and that triggers your inspiration in your brain. What do you do next?
I haven't got a really strict process I always go through. It depends what I'm doing as much as anything. I think pattern tends to come first, imagining a shape, and then the item that I create comes later. So with the giant knitted picture of the underwater sea and the fish, I was thinking about, I wanted to do something with fish and reeds and combining them, and I initially thought of doing a skirt, but then I thought, no, this is going to work best as a picture, and it's just over a metre square, a knitted picture. So I really do think about pattern before form of the item, really. But I haven't got a strict way of doing it. I always work on paper, except for that little picture because it was just so big. In the same way I write my blog on paper, there's something about a screen that just kills my creativity.
Yes.
I know it's different for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So if somebody was maybe new to stranded knitting, is there one of your patterns that you think would be a great place for them to start to do a little experiment?
Yes, maybe. I mean, I've done several cowls, and they're quite good because you knit in the round. There's no purling, and you don't have to do a steek. So there's no scary cutting your knitting. So a cowl is quite a good place to start, and it's a fairly quick project.
Hmm.
And there's one I did with Starcraft batik, and it uses quite a few colours, but you could always reduce the number of colours if you didn't want to use so many. And it's just different abstract motifs piled on top of each other.
Oh,
I'm trying to think of the name actually. I'm embarrassed. I think it might be Carnival. I can't remember because it was a while ago. I'm very sorry.
Well, that sounds like really good fun. And you mentioned steeking. For anybody that doesn't know what steeking is, do you want to describe it?
It involves taking scissors to your knitting. It's because for things such as cardigans, say, that you might want to knit in the round, but need to then be open. It's a way of you knit in the round and you reinforce a set of stitches along the vertical line that you're going to cut. So I'm not explaining this very well.
Where the buttonhole's going to be, where the button band.
Yes, yes. If it was a cardigan, it would be the opening of the cardigan. And as you knitted round and round and round, and this is a technique that's used in stranded knitting and Fair Isle, you would reinforce a set of stitches, quite a narrow set of stitches where you're going to cut. It doesn't need to be a wide set, because I know it's easy to feel the knitting's just going to disintegrate as soon as you take scissors to it, but as long as you're using natural fibres, that's just not going to happen. And there are different ways of reinforcing your stitches. Some people crochet a line either side. I tend to hand sew because then I know I'm picking up every single strand of every stitch. Some people machine sew, so you'll reinforce either side of the line and then you simply cut down that line and your knitting will not fall apart. It's very scary the first time you do it.
Yes.
But it does get easier, I promise.
Yes, I think sometimes if somebody hasn't done one before, maybe do a little mug cozy or something first, where it's only a few rows before you tackle the cardigan. It is very, very scary. But yes, I mean, knitting doesn't, when you cut it, it doesn't unravel that way. It unravels on the other axis, doesn't it? If you drop a stitch, for example. So no, it doesn't. But yeah, something I think every knitter should try. And what designs have you got up and coming then that you can tell us about?
I've been working on a book that, all being well, should come out next year, and it's stranded knitting designs, but very much non-traditional stuff. And at the moment I've been doing different colorways for a skirt. It's a long pencil skirt.
Oh, lovely.
And it's abstract. And although it's bands of patterns, some of them spill into each other because I like being quite playful and changing things, subverting the medium a little bit.
Oh, lovely.
So I've been working on that, and there's one colourway that's really rich with all different colours, and then I'm doing one that's just two different shades of grey, and it's completely different effect. So I've been having a lot of fun with that.
Right. How do you? I've always wanted to know, if you're knitting a skirt, how do you stop yourself from sitting a bum in it? Do you have to line it, or? No,
I think it's a bit of a myth that necessarily happens, because I mean, one thing is if it's a stranded knitting skirt, then if the portion where your bum is stranded, then there's a kind of reinforcement. There's less elasticity there anyway than there would be if it was just plain. So it's less likely to happen. But even when I've made quite a few skirts over the years and worn them. I mean, there's one I must have worn hundreds of times, and it's just not been a problem. Maybe I'd be wary about using purely synthetic fibres, but maybe there's just a bit of give in natural fibre, elasticity perhaps, and it comes back to shape. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, or maybe I've just got an unusual bum. I don't know. I've honestly never found it a problem, even when I've worn a skirt over and over and over again.
Ah, and what are the other projects in the book then? Are they all garments, or?
No, it's a real mixture. From accessories, there's a couple of cowls and some fingerless mitts in there. bags of various sorts, a large project bag, drawstring bag for projects, and then a kind of tote bag. So a real mix of stuff, because I just wanted to celebrate all the things you can do with stranded knitting, and you can take it in all sorts of directions for all kinds of projects.
It sounds fascinating. So you said it's coming out next year, hopefully.
Yes,
Uh,
assuming that everything that's going on at the moment doesn't disrupt
yeah.
the schedule too much.
Yeah. And what do you know what it's going to be called yet? Does it have a name, a working title?
Working title is Stranded Colour Knitting, but I don't know whether that will stand. I'd quite like to call it Modern Stranded Knitting,
Yeah.
to emphasise the fact that it's going in a new direction, but I don't know.
Yeah. And are there any designers that you particularly follow in stranded knitting?
Yeah, I mean, Alice Starmore is
Yeah.
wonderful. And Kate Davies has done some, really lovely non-traditional work, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Who else? Because there's quite
Alice Starmore's work is like they're works of arts, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
That she did
Marie
an amazing
Wallin as well. Her use of colour in stranded work. I mean, you can't get better than her colour choices.
No,
I think she does colour in stranded knitting better than anyone else.
Yeah. You can tell I'm a stranded knitting geek, can't you?
Yes, I know. I haven't got to convince you that stranded is good or fun, have I?
No, not at all. And so that's your knitting life and your crochet life, but you have another life, don't you? In the real world, or your job. Tell us about your job, because that's really fascinating as well.
My day job, on days when I'm not knitting, I'm a clinical psychologist in the NHS, seeing outpatients, adults with really wide variety of mental health problems.
Right. So are you seeing more, is there more demand at the moment? Are people struggling a bit in the current COVID crisis?
Our waiting list is certainly going up at the moment. Unfortunately, we're trying to keep up with it, but not surprisingly, there are a lot of people out there struggling.
Yes, and
I don't think it'd be a surprise for anybody to hear.
Yeah, well, and I know that that people like Bethshan Corkhill from Stitch Links, she's been doing working on research into the benefits to mental health of knitting. Do you have any advice for knitters and crocheters out there, how their craft can help them through the current times we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I think it depends on. I mean, people are coping with this in very different ways and to very different extents. I think try and be aware of what you need. I mean, I imagine some people probably do need, if people are really struggling with their mental health and are feeling very anxious and very depressed, it might be helpful to focus on less demanding projects, just to something to, in a mindful way, be a bit of distraction. Just to, forming those repetitive stitches can be a grounding thing. If you're really emotional and struggling, it can bring you down. And there's solid evidence out there of the benefits of knitting and crochet. It doesn't matter, they're both equally beneficial, I think. But there are other people who are kind of feeling understimulated, and now is the time to find some really ambitious projects that you need to concentrate on. So for anybody who's feeling they're just stagnating, learn a new skill. Decide this is going to be the year where you learn to I don't know, do ontolac or speak, yeah. So I think, be aware of what you need and think about how knitting can fill that gap, and maybe you need a bit of both. But fortunately, I mean, the good thing about knitting, and just as much about crochet, is there's always more you can learn, and it can benefit you in all different ways. So make it work for you. At least it's something we can all do without any risk at the moment. We don't need to stop knitting and crochet, even if everything else has stopped.
No, I saw a funny gif going around saying, crocheters and knitters, this is what we've all been training for.
It's true though. I mean, our time has come. We can sit at home and knit, and that's a good thing to do, and it's not harming anyone or putting anyone at risk.
No, I think mindfulness is, I mean, some people may find that term a little cliched, but actually I know that Bethshan Corkhill was saying, instead of just saving up your knitting to the evening, she was saying do a little bit in the morning, even if it's only 5 minutes, a little bit at lunchtime and a little bit in the evening, because then you're keeping you're stimulating yourself in a positive way throughout the day. And she was talking about some research into mindfulness and its benefits on the immune system as well. So I found that really, really fascinating. So that gives me carte blanche to knit whenever I want to.
Absolutely.
People can't see me now, but I'm actually knitting. No, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact that it is a sedentary thing, so, you know, it wouldn't be ideal to do it all day. Apart from that, there are no downsides.
No.
If you can't knit now, you'll never have a better opportunity. So
That's
those needles.
hey, we got it from Dr. Phil. That's fantastic. And any other mental health tips outside of knitting, or anything else that we can do to look after ourselves and each other at the moment?
It's probably all out there, really. I mean, we're lucky that we've got the internet, because I think staying connected is just so important, and at least we can do that. That doesn't need to stop. I'm a big advocate for keeping physically active, though. Whatever. I mean, obviously, people have got different levels of physical ability and fitness and whatever, but doing whatever fits with, you know, your level of activity. It is important to keep moving. That has a massive effect on emotional well-being as well.
Yeah.
So
I know there are lots of gyms out there that have. There's a Pilates gym near me that have put they've recorded loads and loads of videos and put them all online for something like £9 a month or something, so you can access as many. And my yoga and yoga teachers who are putting yoga lessons on Zoom, and so even if you can't get out, if you're shielding, there's still something out there that you can do.
Yes, absolutely. You don't physically need to leave the house. Obviously, you can go and run 20 miles, but you can do Pilates in your living room.
Yeah,
either is perfectly valid. So yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Phil, and we hope to see you soon in the real world.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Lovely to talk to you, and yes, hopefully see you soon face to face.
Bye.
Thanks, Julia. Bye.